Good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Bide, and I chair Catchment-Based Approaches Urban Water Group. And I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, which will launch the Urban Water Group's new guidance on delivering better water management through local engagement, and also CaBA's new Urban Data Hub. And as well as telling you about the new guidance and the Data Hub, we'll be hearing some exciting presentations showing good urban water management in practice, engaging and involving local communities and driven by data. These examples support the message of the new guidance, showing how, through local action to deliver direct improvements to urban water quality and quantity, and introducing nature-based solutions to reduce flood risk, CaBA partnerships and local communities can drive improvements to the public realm, regenerating and invigorating communities and enabling economic growth and sustainable development. However, before we start, Becca will tell you how the webinar will work.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, I'll just really quickly run through the housekeeping points, which probably be familiar to you if you've attended any of our recent webinars. The first thing is that we've got closed captions available today. If you click CC on the bottom toolbar and then show subtitle, and you can do that again if you need to change the size of the subtitles as well. Those are live auto captions for you. Submitting questions for the Q&A sections of today can be done through the Q&A function. That's also on that bottom toolbar, and you can use that to give a thumbs up to any questions submitted by other people that you'd like to have answered as well, to help us run through that Q&A as efficiently as possible. If you have general comments or feedback, please share that through the chat function as normal. And then finally, just to note that the webinar will be being recorded. Participants, attendees aren't on camera, so that shouldn't be a problem, but please let us know if there is any problem there. Thanks. Back to Peter.
Thank you, Becky. I'll just share my screen and then I'll start. There we are. I'm going to tell you about delivering better water management through local engagement, background to the guidance and what the guidance is delivering. So what I want to cover in this presentation is why better water management matters, what integrated water management is, what integrated water management delivers, how we can deliver integrated water management, and then I'll introduce the new guidance that the Urban Water Group has produced and is publishing today. So, why does better water management matter? Well, extended periods of extreme rainfall are already 7 times more likely than in pre-industrial times. And more than nearly 5.5 million people in the UK live and work in nearly 3 million properties at risk of flooding from rivers and the sea. And 3 million are also at risk of surface water flooding, and 200,000 are at risk of groundwater flooding. And only 10% of floodplains continue to provide their natural flood attenuation function. 42% of floodplains in England and Wales are separated from their rivers, largely by engineering. Part of this problem arises from granting of planning permission for house building. Residential development of floodplains has grown by 1.2% since 2011. That's 0.5% faster than in other areas. Water is a vital and integral part of the urban landscape, and good water management provides opportunities to make our towns and cities greener, healthier, more attractive, more biodiverse, and more resilient to climate change. So what is integrated water management? Integrated water management is a concept that brings together a range of interventions to make the most of opportunities to improve people's lives, while also avoiding and mitigating the risks from too little or too much water and from water pollution. As you can see in this diagram, it brings together three principal aspects of water management: water supply, surface water and flood risk management, and managing our wastewater. And it impinges on urban design, placemaking, creating a productive landscape, and urban planning. So what can integrated water management deliver? There are 10 main areas: reducing the risk from flooding from a range of sources at a range of scales, from landscape scale natural flood management to reducing the risk of river flooding, through to sustainable urban drainage systems, reducing and attenuating runoff to reduce the risk of local flooding. It can increase water efficiency and reduce water stress. Approaches to reduce potable water use, including rainwater harvesting and use, grey water and wastewater recycling and reuse, can reduce demand on public water supplies, and if this is linked to water efficiency measures in buildings, the savings can be significant. And reducing or removing pollution from surface water and providing a more natural and biodiverse water environment is the third outcome. Along with enhanced biodiversity, integrated water management interventions can provide a more natural environment, introducing a range of habitats and species, from wetlands to wildflower meadows at a range of scales, often in otherwise biodiversity poor urban areas. Better blue-green infrastructure from better water management provides functional and connected green space, which delivers multiple benefits, connecting urban places for water, wildlife and people. And improving the accessibility of public spaces and places improves well-being, providing good quality open space, which, as well as managing water, is accessible, creating more livable places, and, as I said, promoting health and well-being. Very importantly, better water management mitigates and adapts to climate change, providing urban green space at a range of scales to make urban areas more resilient by reducing the urban heat island effect, reducing energy consumption, making better use of water, and enabling towns and cities to better cope with more extreme weather events. Using resources more sustainably and efficiently creates cost savings and efficiencies, particularly through partnership working, delivering multiple benefits, which makes schemes affordable, and more can be done for less. This all enables new housing, providing water management and efficiency solutions to challenges such as flood risk, availability of water, lack of drainage capacity, and a poor urban environment. And better water management also facilitates economic growth and regeneration, improving urban environments and enabling sustainable development. So how is integrated water management delivered? There's a four-step process for delivering integrated water management. The first step is to identify and prioritise the water-related opportunities and challenges for the community. It involves identifying local issues and priorities, and the new Urban Data Hub will help with this. Working with communities, utilising citizen science approaches and data, and with local authorities, water companies, businesses, non-government organisations and other stakeholders across the catchment to identify challenges and opportunities. And when the challenges and opportunities in the catchment have been identified, partnerships can decide which integrated water management approaches can be used to achieve the right outcomes and how they work together throughout the catchment. This provides opportunities to develop a framework, an adaptation framework for water to make the catchment more resilient to climate change challenges, and to agree common goals and clear expectations on stakeholders. And opportunities to work with other catchment partnerships to coordinate catchment restoration and join up the plans and aspirations of local planning authorities, lead local flood authorities, water companies, NGOs, businesses and communities through opportunity mapping to shape how land and water is managed at a landscape scale. The second step is to identify the appropriate integrated water management response. There are 4 key aspects to doing this. The first is a robust and accessible evidence base. The second is knowing which integrated water management interventions are appropriate for where you are and the problems you're addressing. Third is identifying the possibilities at an early stage. And the fourth is showing that integrated water management is effective and efficient. The third step is to put in place the measures we need to enable integrated water management. And the key elements that should be in place for this are breaking down institutional barriers and changing mindsets, clear supportive plans and policies from local planning authorities, lead local flood authorities and water companies, secured funding, early and clear identification of long-term management arrangements, and finally good management with a strong champion, coordination of budgets and funding, and the means of enforcing any standards or obligations. And the fourth step is to facilitate the partnerships to achieve the outcomes we want. CaBA partnerships must encourage the members to form the appropriate partnerships to deliver integrated water management. And this will involve early engagement with and between key stakeholders, including lead local flood authorities, local planning authorities, water companies, businesses, and the local community. Understanding the partners' interests and drivers, and also communicating the multiple benefits of the integrated water management interventions. And to make sure that all this happens and to help CaBA partnerships in the process of delivering integrated water management, the Urban Water Group is today publishing new guidance on delivering better water management through local engagement. And this guidance shows CaBA partnerships and other key partners, particularly local authorities, water companies, businesses and NGOs, how they can play a key part in maintaining and improving the livability and sustainability of the urban environment. It shows how, through local action, to deliver direct improvements to urban water quality and quantity, and introducing nature-based solutions to reduce flood risk, partnerships can drive improvements to the public realm, regenerating and invigorating communities and enabling economic growth and sustainable development. And the guidance covers the importance of integrated water management in delivering sustainable urban catchments, covering what I covered in the first part of this talk. It tells partnerships how to engage with key partners, how to empower communities, how to get and use data and information, and this is where the Urban Hub is so important, and how to develop projects and secure funding. And it's illustrated by 24 case studies to show that it isn't that difficult. Certainly not as difficult as it might sound. But this is the link to the guidance, and if you copy this link and click on it, it'll take you straight to the new guidance. Thank you very much.
Okay, so next up we're going to hear from Lucy Butler, and Lucy has sent in her presentation, which is going to be on data and the Urban Hub. So I'm just going to cue that up now.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Butler. I'm part of the CaBA technical support team, and today I'm going to give you an introduction to the new CaBA Urban Data Hub. So CaBA partnerships are supported by a growing team of technical specialists, And one of our key aims is to make data and evidence more available and accessible to partnerships and communities. And we've done this primarily through development of the CaBA data package. So the CaBA data package and user guide, it's been developed over the last 7 years, and there are now over 200 layers available. This makes it a hugely valuable resource for catchment partnerships, but it can also make it a bit overwhelming knowing where to start or identifying the really key layers for your situation. So the technical support team are now working with a number of the CaBA working groups to develop resources and hubs that make it easier to access key data related to those working group themes. And that's included working with the Urban Water Group to develop the Urban Data Hub. So the Urban Data Hub includes an online catalogue of over 50 GIS layers that are relevant to partnerships working in urban environments, and that's supported by a data explorer to help non-GIS users access the data and create simple maps without the need for any specialist software. There are links to the health and wellbeing evidence base developed by Ribble Rivers Trust, and also a story map to provide guidance on the key urban data sources, and that also includes links to further resources and webinars related to the use of urban data.
So where can you access the Urban Data Hub resources? Well, if you go to the CaBA Open Data portal, which you can find at data.catchmentbasedapproach.org, this is where you can access the online CaBA data package. But if you click on this tab at the top called Working Groups, it'll take you to the page where we've begun to theme the data layers and also resources to help you access the data by working group theme. So you can see we've got some tools and resources linked to coast and estuaries, and then if you scroll down you'll find the resources linked to urban data. So you can see you can click to view the story map, you can browse the data catalogue, you can open the Urban Data Explorer, and you can also access the health and wellbeing evidence base. So just to show you accessing the data catalogue, if you click on the button for view data there, it will open the catalogue where you can search through the urban data layers that we've got there. If you find a layer of interest to you, if you just click on it, it will open with some more information about that layer. You can find out details on any licensing requirements, and you can begin to pull the data into online maps or story maps, or you can also download the data in a variety of open data formats.
Okay, so what's available in the catalogue? Well, we've categorised the key urban data sets into a number of key areas. So firstly, under flood risk and climate vulnerability, this includes the flood risk maps for river and coastal flooding and also surface water flooding. We've also included some layers from Climate Just on social vulnerability to flood risk, both currently and under future climate change scenarios, and the working with natural processes opportunity maps. We've then got data on water and air quality, and that includes SAGE's source apportionment modelling, and in particular we've pulled out and visualised data to highlight where contributions from urban, diffuse and point sources are potentially greatest. There's data on CSO spills in terms of number and duration for 2020, together with data from the Water Industry National Environment Programme, pulling out actions with an urban wastewater treatment directive driver. There's data on pollution incidents, wider consented discharges, and also data on air quality, including ammonia and particulate matter emissions. There is data on health and wellbeing, which includes the data layers from the health and wellbeing evidence base that's been developed by Ribble Rivers Trust, which Ellie Brown's going to talk about in more detail a little later on. And then we have some data on citizen science, which pulls data from various apps such as Freshwater Watch, the River Obstacles app and Modular River Survey. We've also included the WFD 2019 classification data, SSSI condition status, and various urban base mapping layers such as built up areas and city boundaries.
Okay, so I'm now going to give you a quick demo of the Urban Data Explorer. So once you're in the Explorer, you'll see that there's various buttons and icons around the screen that you can use to access the different functions. So you can click on this one down here to search through the whole Urban Data Catalogue, or you can also, to make it a bit easier, search via the categories that I mentioned earlier. So the data's categorised into water and air quality, flood risk and climate, health and wellbeing, citizen science, etc. It's worth noting that you can also search through the wider online CaBA data package if there are any layers that we haven't included in the urban data package that you want to include in your map. So once you've found your layers of interest, you can click on Add to add them to your map, and you can also click on Details to find out more information about that layer. So we'll maybe just add another couple of layers to the map. And for some layers you might need to zoom in until they become visible. So I added the risk of flooding from surface water there, so that's one of the layers that you need to zoom in for. So you can then use these icons in the top right to do things like view the legend and the layer list, so you can turn layers on and off. And you can also click on this More Options button to do things like vary the transparency of your data. You can also change the base map, so you can overlay data on aerial imagery if you want to do that as well. You can access the attribute table using this button here. And we've also added a few extra tools to the Explorer. So there's a simple measurement tool for working out areas and distances. There's a swipe tool, which I quite like. You can choose the layer that you want to swipe on and off, which can make it a bit easier to view data sets that are underlying each other and compare data. We've got a select tool, so you can select data in your area of interest, and also a print function, so you can print off a JPEG or a PDF to include in a report or a funding bid, for example. You can also click on quite a lot of the data layers to pop up more information about that data set. So you can see this has opened the pop-up for the WFD status, and that has a link off to the Catchment Data Explorer for that water body. So we've also developed a story map to sit alongside the Urban Data Catalogue and the Explorer to give a bit more guidance on using the data, and also links to lots of helpful resources to help you do that. So it just starts with a bit of an introduction about the Urban Data Hub, with a link as a reminder to where you can find all the resources. And then the next section is further guidance on some of the key national data sources that are available within the catalogue, that sits alongside embedded maps. So as you scroll down, you can also view the data and explore the data, and you can see that we've split that guidance into the same categories as before, so flood and climate, water quality, health and wellbeing. The next section that we've then got is on local data, which highlights local sources of data that might be available and really helpful to your partnership, for example from water companies or local authorities. And you can see we've embedded a webinar that was held last year on data sharing between CaBA and the water industry. And in this section, we've also embedded a link to a local catchment story map, giving you an example of how you can use this data and pull it in to create a local evidence portal for your catchment. So the example we've got is for the Brent catchment, and this one's been developed by Thames 21. So you can see there all the embedded links open and take you to the further website, so you can explore things further. Moving on, our next section is on citizen science, and in this section we've got links to some of the key citizen science monitoring tools that are relevant to urban environments. So we've got the Outfall Safari, Riverfly, Modular River Survey, Freshwater Watch and River Obstacles app. And then there's also some links to further resources and training that might be helpful around citizen science. And then the final section of the story map is a series of case studies showing how CaBA partnerships have been using data and evidence to support integrated urban water management. So the story map includes loads of embedded content and links to further information, so things like webinars and tools and training materials and resources. So we hope that it's a really helpful sort of one-stop shop for further guidance on using urban data.
Okay, thank you for listening. If you've got any further questions, you can always get in touch with the CaBA technical support team via info@catchmentbasedapproach.org. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lucy. That was really good, and I can really thoroughly recommend the Urban Data Hub, and the story map is terrific. Our next presentation is giving an Environment Agency perspective, and that's being presented by Toni Scarr from the Environment Agency, who's one of the members of the Urban Water Group. So Toni, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Peter. I am going to give a go at sharing the content, but yeah, let's see if I can. There we go. It's hard to know if you can see that. Strangely, yeah, I can see the slides.
It's all looking fine, Toni.
Fab, thanks. It's nice to have a tiny bit of feedback. That's good. Thank you, Peter. So I'm Toni Scarr and I work at the Environment Agency. And what I wanted to tell you about today was a little bit about the Environment Agency and what we do in relation to sustainable urban water management. And perhaps also highlight the benefits of just getting on with it sometimes. So what I wanted to start with is just to mention when I started the Environment Agency, it was quite a long time ago. So back in 2003, I was working on Greenwich Peninsula, the picture here. And in my naivety, I think I was a biodiversity officer, I just started. I copied over a condition. We used to send local authorities the conditions we wanted for planning applications. Popped that on for Greenwich Peninsula, and sure enough, luckily, Greenwich attached it. So after they got their planning permission, they did contact us to say, did we really mean that they had to fully design and implement a whole drainage, landscape, ecological master plan all in place before they could build one single unit on the whole site? So we did work with them from then. I had sort of copied something over, but it does show you what you can sometimes get away with a little bit of persuasion. But out of that, it was great that they then looked at the benefits of what was needed for the whole site. And they did agree to make 20% of those roofs green roofs, or 22,650 meters squared, something like that. I don't know why it sticks in my mind, but yeah, I'd be interested to see what some of that looks like. But it is worth asking for things sometimes. I think that's what I learned from that experience. So what I wanted to say was what we do at the Environment Agency. So what our role is within this. So we have our aim to create a better place for people and wildlife and to support sustainable development. And as part of that, we would look at our approach to achieve the best outcomes for people and environment. We're a non-departmental public body, so we are sponsored by DEFRA. We regulate major industry, so like conventional waste management or steel industry, chemical plants, cement production, oil and gas exploration, all sorts of things. We're also an environmental operator and manage and operate flood defences. We provide advice to government, local authorities, industry and other stakeholders, including spatial planning. We undertake a number of conservation activities. I can't see who's online, but I'm sure we've worked with quite a few of you on certain partnership projects delivering for biodiversity. We also have a key role in planning, delivering and enabling infrastructure to support new development and new homes. As part of that, we look to ensure people and the environment are protected, that the development is resilient to climate change, and we've got a strategic overview role for flood risk and erosion, coastal erosion management. We also advise the government and industry in relation to water company and waste infrastructure investment, and we help to ensure the environment's an integral part of their plans for growth. So, what do we do on sustainable urban water management and placemaking? As part of an operator, regulator, advisor, we will look at our flood risk management teams, will look at the design and building of the flood defences. Our environment management teams will look at this as part of preventing pollution of water and dealing with pollution incidents. And our installation teams will be dealing with the major waste and process industry. But all of this has impact on the place. I wanted today to look a bit more on our work as a partner and an advisor, and also where that role is in particular. It's where there's opportunities to innovate, and done well, where you can really make things look quite different and approaches be quite different. So we will provide advice as a placemaker to those developments in the pipeline to help support decision making and use our influence to articulate the value and the importance of the environment as part of that placemaking. So we might look for opportunities to shape strategic plans for growth, including local authority, local plans, local enterprise partnerships, combined authorities, and particularly on strategic growth initiatives like the OxCam ARC or that type of thing. We provide technical advice as a statutory consultee for planning applications and national infrastructure projects. So last year that meant responding to about 13 to 14,000 planning applications. We also look to help attract investment in the environment and shape policy and delivery of the remaining EU funding and other growth funding, and helping partners to make good bids into funds that they've got, and to make good things with that money. We also, as part of that, will influence water company investment programmes and using partnership funding approaches to flood risk to get more for the environment as part of that investment. We also look to influence developer contributions locally through things like community infrastructure levy. So how do we influence development? And that's done in 3 different ways. We will look nationally to work with DEFRA and MHCLG to provide technical advice in terms of their planning policy, their planning practice guidance, and also other government departments like the National Infrastructure Commission. We provide advice and evidence on resilience and that type of thing. Strategically, we will provide planning advice, and this is particularly important, and particularly we need to get in there early, and that would be our advice, is to allow you to identify opportunities and constraints early, working closely with others, including developers and local authorities, LEPs, combined authorities, to support that as a statutory consultancy for local authority, local plans. And locally, we'll support local authority development management as part of our statutory consultancy role on planning applications. So we will work with developers early to help shape their proposals. And what we're looking to achieve, some of the things are listed there. And for example, on flood risk, and that is one way that we will be looking as part of this urban development. But by steering buildings and developments into the right places, it's particularly important. So at the moment in England, about 1 in 6 residential and commercial properties, so that's about 5.2 million, is at risk from river, coastal or surface water flooding. And remembering the average damage cost per flooded home is between 23,000 and 30,000. Those figures come from the 2007 floods, so one to keep in mind. But an inspiring example I wanted to show you was one that comes from Greater Manchester. So that is a really good example of where strategic engagement on place shaping and building trust and rapport as a partner can really change what's going on. This was also one of the urban pioneers that came out of the government's 25-year environment plan. So Greater Manchester Combined Authority's high growth and development aspirations. It wants over the next couple of decades, so by 2040, to attract 200,000 new jobs, 300,000 new people, 220,000 new homes. So it's big growth. So what we've looked at is to work with them for several years to facilitate the delivery of economic growth, which delivers the widest benefits for the environment and local communities. And what we've done, a key part of that was actually to put some of our staff into the Combined Authority, which has really helped us work together. So we've helped them in developing their housing infrastructure bids to MHCLG, one which saw 23 million to support Northern Gateway development. I think on the questions we've got some representatives from there. So hopefully what I'm saying is right. I just wanted to really mention this scheme because it's been delivering so much to secure and enable new homes through investment in flood risk mitigation, river renaturalisation and land remediation. We've also been supporting them to develop their Greater Manchester Environment Fund, which has lots of partners and is used to develop investable packages of environmental projects. So those are particularly around carbon, habitat banking, and an ambition to provide around 5 million annual environmental project investment opportunities over the next sort of 3 to 5 years, which is vital to help developers with viable local biodiversity and carbon offset solutions to support sustainable economic growth. And I also put up this, the partnership project, the Ignition. So that aims to develop innovation financing solutions for investment in Greater Manchester's natural environment. So that's been really useful at looking to enable retrofitting of urban green infrastructure and nature-based solutions for climate resilience. So particularly looking at overheating, shade, looking at flooding and cooling. So hopefully this is looking to get a pipeline of projects with evidence and gets the economic and social returns from green infrastructure. I also wanted to quickly mention some local schemes. I have memories of Croydon, and I think this is a great example of where local groups are quite integral. I remember being put in a dark room by the Friends of Wandle and a lectern to speak to them a little bit like this, so I couldn't actually see any of them. But what they wanted to know was what could be done with the Wandle, and they were really instrumental in helping us work with the local developers on what could be done. So back in 2011, the London plan set a target of 13,300 homes to be built in Croydon. And to regenerate the Wandle part, it's sort of comprised of 3 schemes, all linked by the river. So this mixed use residential employment scheme, a retail development, and a restored public park. But remembering this is ranked in the top sort of 50 most deprived areas in the UK. So it was pretty important to get some parkland and accessible space there. But back in the 60s, the River Wandle, like quite a few of the London rivers, disappeared under a deep underground concrete channel. And this new development restored 900 metres of the river to the surface. So this scheme really shows how, in this instance, Barrett's Homes and Tesco's worked with us and CaBA Council on a comprehensive approach to create high quality housing, river restoration and public open spaces. And worked with us to divert the Wandle back into a naturalised channel, and a part of the enhancements were planned alongside food store development, so Tesco's food store development. But it also, you can see in some of the pictures, but it'd be good to show you more, but all the varied bank profiles and various other habitats created for sort of our wetland species, and also hopefully reducing some flood risk. Another scheme, which again the first sort of stage in this was Sutcliffe Park and also Manor Park, which were flood risk schemes by the Environment Agency, but really local groups were key in pressuring us and inspiring what could be done there. And so as part of the development of the ferry estate, again, there was a different scale of intervention enabled. So this was 1 billion restoration of the former 1960s ferry estate through Kidbrooke. It's about 109 hectare scheme split into 6 phases over 20 years, and it'll provide 5,000 new homes, shops, cafes, healthcare facilities, schools, green spaces, new railway station. And you can see on the slide there's a bit of a grey before and hopefully putting colour after pictures. But again, it's this early engagement was really crucial on this project. So with Berkeley Homes taking an account management approach, we helped to ensure resilience to climate change was designed in, and inclusion of 35 hectares of high quality green space and a sustainable drainage system as part of it, including wetlands and ponds and those aspects. Also central to the village master plan, they put in the new Cater Park, which links Sutcliffe Park, Manor Park, providing this green spine through sort of South London and through the development. It also allowed Berkeley Home to intensify the development. What's interesting also is if you Google Kidbrooke, they do sell the site very much on that green infrastructure element, and they seem to be really proud how they partnered with the Wildlife Trust and others who were involved in developing this site. Also, another way that we are selling this is to do with the health and well-being. I think, Peter, are you joining? Do I need to finish in a second?
If you wouldn't mind, Toni, because we're very tight on time. Thank you.
That's fine. I just wanted to highlight that that we've been looking at the sort of the health side of things, and that some of these aspects is quite linked to how we can promote some of the green infrastructure. A key link between the blue and green infrastructure and what that would deliver. There's also a number of partnership fundings that are coming if we're not looking just at environments type of fundings. If you look at the bottom of this slide, there's a few lists of ones which might be useful to us. And I just wanted to end by saying we've just run a few citizen juries and engaging in a deliberative manner. It was quite interesting that the question we asked people was how they connected with water in their local environment and what needs to be changed in the future. And all of the 3 locations where we were asking people and discussing people of what they wanted better planning and development that it was incorporating wildlife. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Toni. Can you unshare your screen? I
can. There we go.
There we are. Thank you. Yes, thank you for showing those examples as well. The Wandle and Croydon is one of my favourite ones. In fact, my background at the moment is the end result of the Wandle Park regeneration.
Brilliant.
And I'd like to move on now to another really good example, a really up-to-date example of engaging with communities and using all the different tools in the IWM box and providing multiple benefits. So Andy Graham, who's also a member of the Urban Water Group from the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, is going to tell us about the Salthill Stream in Slough. Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Just looking for my PowerPoint somewhere. Okay, so how's that looking?
That's looking fine to me, Andy.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Becky. Yeah, so my name's Andy Graham. I'm from the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, and my role in the organisation is really to help with delivering urban projects, such as the one we have just recently finished in Slough, which was a wonderful partnership project with Slough Borough Council, Thames Water, the Environment Agency, and of course the people of Slough. So This is going to be a whistle-stop tour. Please do get in touch if you have any other questions that I haven't mentioned, stuff that you want to hear about. So this is lovely Slough. When I first started working there, I trepidated somewhat about what I might find, but actually after having worked there on this project for a number of years, I'm getting quite fond of Slough. So the Salt Hill stream, you can't see here, but you might be able to pick out the valley of it in the park in front of you. The big clump of trees just nestling up against the railway line is where we removed the culvert and restored floodplain and created a new stream. So just to point out that area there, though it has lovely self-set sycamores, it was an area of a lot of antisocial behaviour, but also a strong fear of crime. And the park itself, you can see that path running left to right. It goes under the railway and links communities, and people were really quite scared about using that path. So hopefully it will show you that we've made an improvement to their lives, at least in that respect. So this is a little map of the stream itself. It's a very short stream, around about 10 kilometres, most of it urban and most of it underground. And the bits that aren't underground look like that on the left. So definitely unloved, disregarded, and polluted, and not really yielding any of the multiple benefits that we know streams in urban areas can yield. So that's a pretty grim prospect at the start of our project 3 or 4 years ago. But we had joined with our other partners to do something about that, to try and raise appreciation of the stream in the minds of local people in Slough. And just a few more pics here. So not atypical of an urban stream, horrible concrete structures, pipes, grates that just trash screens that collect litter, low flows and polluted water. Often there were fish kills. There weren't many fish in there, and the really strange thing about it is that every year our good colleagues from the Environment Agency would put some more fish in, only for them in certain sections of the stream to just die the year later when low flows hit. And then, you know, paradoxically, when it rained, because it's such a hard urban surface, the catchment, we'd have flash flooding in places where we didn't want it. So very badly managed over the years, and very unloved by the local people. And I just showed you a little picture of a duck there, that to indicate that there is actually some wildlife in the stream. So we wanted to find out from people what they wanted, rather than turn up and do a new river and then disappear. We wanted to engage them with ideas around looking after their own environment, and ideas around climate change and flooding and flood resilience and nature recovery, and getting involved in looking after their own environment. And here we can see on the left our former projects officer, Claire, working with kids from the local schools. And this is the Yellowfish campaign, which hopefully you'll be aware of, something that was imported from Canada, I think. And basically on that little sticker, which we stuck along lots of drains, it says only rain down the drain, which is a reminder that these places aren't, the drains aren't for oil or detergent or anything really, they're just for rainwater. And actually messaging to youngsters in schools, as you know, is a great way to connecting with parents as well. So the ripples from that engagement activity with several schools in Slough along the catchment, meant that we connected with 200 or 300 kids, and then also their families as well. We'd also run little competitions. This one here is a lovely painting by a school kid, won a prize. I think a trip to our London Wetlands Centre and a lovely little camera. And this is a little sign that we put up to start to say to people that, hey, the stream isn't a place for dumping rubbish. And kids are really, well, in this case, they said they were ashamed of how the river looked. So we were quite pleased that they got on board with that straight away. And these little signs now run along all of the Salt Hill stream in the parks. We also worked with the local school kids to do work on ecology and biology, and we ran a lot of river classes. for kids. In some parts, the Salt Hill stream is quite nice to look at and has fairly decent water quality because it is a gravel stream. So lots of good fresh water in it in places. And here the Environment Agency are releasing with the kids, I think it was 1,000 fish, chub, dace and roach. And every kid who came to that day managed to release a fish of their own. And we encouraged them to give it a name and then to write something about what they thought that fish was doing as soon as it was released. So there's some wonderful little poems and little stories about fishes swimming upstream and making homes in the new river. It's really quite enchanting to get involved with young kids. They really have got an appreciation of nature that we need to support them with when they enter their teenage years, when it all seems to go a little bit wrong. But anyway, we had about 60 or 70 kids releasing fish, and like I say, they all had a good time, and they all had a new connection with the stream, and many of them had never really been to the stream before. Lots of volunteering activities, which you'll all be familiar with. So lots of litter picking, but doing other stuff like replacing horrible concrete bridges with lovely flat deck wooden bridges, which was a great project. So when these people who are local volunteers actually be using this stuff for years to come now, can have great pride in what they've achieved. And here we are on a tributary of the Salt Hill stream, just doing some river narrowing, because in the past the rivers have been dredged and deepened and widened. So we were just using some natural materials, some hazel faggots here, to narrow the stream and increase the flow, and to reveal once again the lovely gravel substrate, which all of the Salt Hill streams should be showing, but sadly not, because of low flows and the way that the channel has been widened. We worked very closely with schools in their schools, and here you can see a couple of the SuDs rain gardens that we created with them. And alongside creating stuff, and the kids were involved in making this where they could, and certainly in planting, but they were also involved in designing, and we had a learning program where for a few weeks beforehand we worked together to tell them about climate change and the water cycle and ecology of rivers and so on, and how things might change in the future and what they could do to help. And then culminating in creating their own rainscape in their own school, which they can use for learning or relaxing, just watching dragonflies and butterflies and frogs and things. So a great boon for the schools. I think we did SuDs in 7 or 8 schools in Slough. We also ran bio blitzes over the course of the project, and these are our colleagues from London Uni who would come up every year, ecology and environmental science students who would run the bio blitz for us and run various activities. And here they're proudly showing the list of stuff that we found. And I can remember the most exciting thing was we found a stone loach, which I was amazed at. We wanted to engage with people about what they wanted to change about the park and the stream, just like we heard in Toni's previous presentation. Finding out from the community really what it is they didn't like, or they did like, or they wanted improved. And we had some great stories. So we sort of ran lots of walk-in consultations in the park and also in the library, and asked people to tell us what they felt when they saw this palette of ideas. And one interesting thing that I was there when there was a Polish woman who came in, and she looked at it and she said, the pictures of the willows and the reeds down the bottom remind me so much of home. And she got quite emotional, that she connected with that straight away. And it just made me think that there are lots of people wandering around in places like Slough who have got lots of connections with water and rivers and wetlands in the past. But if just we could unlock again, we could build ourselves a really good community of river and wetland ambassadors in our urban areas. And that's just what we wanted to do. So these are some of the ideas. You can see that the trees there, well, we did pull down about 80 cell-set sycamores, but you might think about how, when dusk is falling and you're walking through that and you're going under the railway, how it might feel to you. So we did say that we would open that up, and the police were very pleased about that as well, because it helped them in their job. Here's the work of the contractors, and I have to say that Ebsford Environmental were very very good and worked as partners with us, helping us along the way to create the very best for the limited budget that we had. And here you can see the wetland pools going in on the right and the new pathways, making all of our new wetlands accessible, ripping out the old culvert on the left, a bit of a bigger view there. And the trees have gone. It's a lovely wetland, a lovely open landscape, very welcoming, accessible. This is what it looks like now. So we've removed 90 metres of culvert. There's now no culverted stream in Salt Hill Park, and we've created a 150 metre new channel. And you can just pick out the online pools next to it, and they will be at high flows. They will be connected. Loads of planting. You know, thousands of wetland plants went in with volunteers and trees. And it's absolutely amazing now that, you know, people are using that. And if you were to go down to the park and just stand on the bridge, people invariably would come up and say, it's amazing what has been achieved. And I just would say that, you know, we've embedded this in the whole of the community. And I think we've connected with 1,000 people directly through volunteering and schools programs and events. But many, many more are using that site now as a thoroughfare, and it's also a place to stay and picnic and tarry a while. I'm not sure how much time I've got left. I've got a very short video after this slide, but I just would say some learning points.
Yeah,
I think
you're running a bit tight on time, Andy. So if you
okay, well, I'll leave that with you. Just let's say that we favoured a grassroots approach, which we think we've been right to do. Let me just show you this video. This is some views of volunteers working on the project with us. It's very, very short.
Andy, it's not showing up. Is it supposed to have started yet?
Yes, it has. Not showing up?
No, I think if you could just pop the link to it in the chat, just because we are running about 10 minutes behind.
Okay.
So it might be best if people can just watch that with the link. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, so yeah, do get in touch if you need any further information. Happy to talk to you about that, and we will also be going down there later in the year, and we might have an open day, an event where we could invite people to as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Another really good example of how not only getting the importance of getting the community involved, but turning something which was definitely not a community asset into something which very much is a community asset, and really engaging people so you get social regeneration as well as environmental regeneration. It's fantastic. Next example, the next presentation we've got is bringing together what we've been talking about on health and well-being in terms of health and well-being data sets. And this is from Ellie Brown from the Ribble Rivers Trust.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Hopefully you can see that now. So I'm just going to give you a quick update on some analysis and mapping work that I've done to create essentially a decision support tool to identify where creating public green and blue spaces and improving people's access to high quality green and blue spaces could have the greatest benefits for populations that are most in need of this. Oh, I haven't actually shared, have I?
Yeah, you're sharing now. That looks fine.
Brilliant, thank you. So this is an analysis that I've done across the whole of England. And some of you might have attended a webinar that I did about this last August. But since that webinar, I've updated all the data and there's some new data sets that are available as part of this. So I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction about all this. There will be an hour-long webinar later in the year. And so I'm not going to go into any detail about the analysis, but instead just show you some of the resulting data sets that are now available for you to use. And all the data that I'm going to show you is available for you to use on ArcGIS Online and via Desktop GIS. So this is one of the key data sets that are now available to you in all the maps actually that I'm going to show you. The darker the blue, the greater the problem is, or the greater the opportunity to make a difference, depending on how you look at it. So on this map, the darker the blue, the greater the levels of obesity and inactivity and illnesses that are related to obesity and inactivity. And so those are locations where actions to address inactivity and obesity are likely to have the greatest benefits for health and well-being of the local populations. So I'll just zoom into an area of the Ribble catchment. On the left of the map, you've got Blackpool, in the middle you've got Preston, on the right you've got Blackburn, all significant urban areas. So all of this, most of the statistics that you're going to see are actually reported for census boundaries called middle layer super output areas, just because they split the country up into really manageable amounts, really. So that map there is kind of a summary map of where the main issues are in terms of obesity, inactivity and illnesses associated with them. But you can interrogate the data that's fed into that overall summary map, so you can really start to drill down and see what the specific issues are. So this map just shows what the levels of those illnesses are that are related to obesity and inactivity. So on this map, the darker the blue, the higher the combined levels of each of these illnesses that are listed here. So asthma, cancer, kidney disease, coronary heart disease, depression, diabetes, high blood pressure and stroke. Zoom into the same area of the Ribble. You can interrogate the data, you can click on areas in the map and you get a pop-up, and that can give you statistics relating to that area. And it also, if you look at the writing in red, it gives you details of other data sets that you should view in combination with this one to see perhaps where there was gaps in the data or where there might be limitations in the data that you need to be aware of. So all these statistics were actually reported at the GP practice level, but it wasn't that usable, so I've converted it to these census boundaries, so hopefully it's a bit more useful. You can look at data for specific health and wellbeing issues, because you might want to target specific issues through a project. So you might want to get certain communities outside doing some practical volunteering with you. So this map shows where there's greatest levels of depression among adults. Again, darker the blue, the greater the levels. You can look at where there are areas with the greatest level of obesity among adults, because you might want to design a project that specifically targets adult obesity in at-risk communities. Or you can see where there's the greatest levels of excess weight among children. And so, as I said earlier, and a lot of these data sets, you can click on an area on the map and you get a pop-up that gives you specific stats relating to, in this case, the number and percentage of local children within that population who have excess weight. And in terms of this data set, you can actually view data for individual age groups via some different layers as well. You can see where a project to get adults more active could be of most benefit to the local communities, or where a project working with school children to increase their activity levels could also have the greatest benefits. And again, the pop-ups give you specific stats. And actually all the pop-ups all have links in them, so that you can actually go to the raw data and investigate it further if you wanted to. And then there's this layer all about population statistics, which could help you to figure out what's going on in the population. It can help you to figure out why there might be high levels of certain issues within certain populations, or it could help you to figure out what a good approach would be to address those issues. So you can look at the age structure of the local population, or the diversity or lack of, I guess, ethnicity and religious beliefs, because these all affect the behaviours of the local population, including the likelihood of the population exercising outdoors or making use of local green spaces. And it will certainly affect the methods that you will use to try and address those issues within those populations. So that's kind of the health side of things. This is another key data set that relates this time to the environmental side of things, and it helps you to identify opportunities to improve the environment for the benefit of people's health and well-being. So this data set shows the area of accessible green and blue space per 1,000 population. And it incorporates lots of data relating to those kind of official designated open spaces like your nature reserves and your green space and your open access land, but then also the areas where people can experience green and blue spaces by walking on a public footpath next to a river and that kind of thing. And it allows you to see where in urban areas there's less than the recommended 4 hectares of publicly accessible green and blue space per 1,000 population. So if these areas where there's not enough green and blue space, if they overlap with areas that we saw in the previous data sets, if they overlap with areas that have high levels of obesity and inactivity and the illnesses that are related to obesity and inactivity, you could potentially tackle 2 problems with one project. So you could create or improve publicly accessible green and blue space, or just improve people's access to existing spaces in areas where people need it the most. And you could also work with local populations in the process of creating or improving those spaces to get them involved in active outdoor volunteering, so you could directly improve their health and well-being that way as well. You do need to consider whether all these lovely new green spaces that you want to create are going to be used. So are they accessible? Are there public footpaths nearby? There's also this layer available that shows where all the public transport stops are. And there's also this layer available which shows a summary of the levels of crime in the area and what types of crime occur. So you might be looking at a space and then you look at this data set and see that actually there's really high levels of crime and it's all antisocial behaviour and violent crime. So actually, would that prevent people from feeling safe in this area, and will it not get used? Or could it be a way to address the problem? And there's also a few data sets that allow you to identify where the environment is directly impacting on people's health. So this map shows the percentage of deaths that are thought to have been caused by particulate air pollution. And this map shows where those emissions are coming from. So the darker the blue, the higher the levels of emissions. And this could help you to plan where you can do something about this. So you could use this map to decide where to create public open spaces that encourage people to access areas that are less polluted. Or you could create accessible woodlands or plant trees in existing open spaces to reduce the levels of particulate air pollution within these key problem areas where emissions are high. And there's also a data set on there that shows you the catchment areas for each GP practice, because you might want to get in touch with the local GPs for example, a green prescribing project. They are a little bit messy. Some GP catchment areas overlap, so some areas are covered by 20 plus GPs, but by clicking on the map you can get the name of each GP practice so you can get in touch with them. So there are loads of data sets to help you to piece together where your work is needed the most, where particular types of work could have the greatest benefits, and the stats to back those judgments up. And the idea is that it could help you to make the best use of your resources, but also to provide the evidence base to help you to bring more funding in to do those types of work. So all the layers I've just shown you and a lot more are available on ArcGIS Online. With each layer, there's a detailed description of how the analysis was carried out, where the data came from, what the limitations are in the data, if there's any other data sets it should be viewed in combination with. You can also bring these layers directly into ArcGIS Pro software. And very soon all the data will be available to download from the CaBA Data Hub. An existing story map from the last iteration of this will be updated so that everyone, even those of you without access to GIS, can access and use the data. And there will be an hour-long webinar later in the year where we'll cover this in a lot more detail, but my 10 minutes are up. So there's my email address if anyone has any questions in the meantime.
Thank you very much, Ellie. If you could unshare the screen.
Yes.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and it underlines the importance of the evidence to support interventions for health and well-being. We've gone in a fairly short space of time from health and well-being being an unintended consequence of better water management to it now being one of those multiple benefits that we actually seek from the outset, and that sort of evidence is what we need to plan to make sure it happens. So thank you very much. That's the end of our first session. We're running behind time, and most of the questions, in fact pretty well all the questions that we've had so far have been answered online. It's one of the advantages of Zoom. So I'm proposing that we carry on because there are only a few outstanding questions which I'm hoping Ellie will be able to answer online in the answer section of the Q&A. So if we can move straight on to the next section, and then we'll pick up the any remaining questions at the end. So are we able to move on to Ian's presentation, Becky?
Yeah, Ian should just be coming on in a second.
Yeah, Ian is from Enfield Council, and he's going to be telling us about constructed wetlands and particularly the multiple benefits from them, echoing what we've already been talking about in the other presentations. So if Ian's ready, Ian?
Hi, can you see me all right?
See you fine, yep.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Just give me a shout if you can see that.
Yeah, we see the PowerPoint.
I'm going to get in presentation mode. There we go.
That's it. Looking good.
Great. All right. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, I'm Ian Russell. I work for Enfield Council, and I'm really going to focus on the work we've been doing on constructed wetlands and the reasons why we like them so much. So I'm just going to start off with a little bit of background about Enfield. It's the northernmost borough in London, right on the edge of the city. It's also one of the most populous boroughs. It's got a population of about 340,000 people. It's got many rivers, as you can see, flowing across the borough. So there's sort of three main rivers that flow from west to east and join the River Lee, which is on Enfield's eastern boundary. So it's fantastic having these rivers, but they also do create some problems or concerns for members of the community. So one of the major ones is flood risks. There's thousands of properties in Enfield that would be at risk of flooding for an extreme rainfall event. Also, these rivers are very heavily polluted, as we've heard from Andy and others this morning. Urban rivers suffer from the way they've been treated in the past. They're often treated as dumping grounds for rubbish and litter and so on, but also many of the rivers in Enfield have been culverted and channelized, and that leads to increased risk of flooding, increased risk of pollution. What you often find with these kind of hidden rivers is that when you do get heavy rainfall, they don't stay hidden for long. Suddenly the water presents itself at the surface and can lead to all sorts of unintended consequences. So over the last few years, we've been increasingly using nature-based solutions, so green infrastructure, sustainable drainage, and in particular constructed wetlands to try and address some of these issues. And as you can see from this plan, over the last 6 or 7 years, we've actually created about 9 wetlands across the borough. Many of these have been delivered in partnership with Thames 21, and we've also worked with the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. But we don't want to stop there. We've actually identified about another 20 odd locations where we could potentially deliver more wetlands in the future. So we want to keep going, and if we can keep doing 1 or 2 of these every year, then we'll have increasingly more significant impacts on improving the health of Enfield's rivers. So as we've heard, these types of features deliver a wide range of benefits. I've just brought in this slide here from the SuDs manual, which hopefully many of you are familiar with. I mean, essentially wetlands are big SuDs, basically. And whenever we deliver one of these projects, we're always trying to focus on these kind of the 4 pillars of SuDs. So you've got water quality, obviously reducing the impact of pollution, biodiversity, amenity, and last but not least, water quantity or flood storage. So I won't talk too much about water quality because I'm aware that John Bryden from Thames 21 after me is going to be focusing his presentation on this topic. But essentially, the rivers in urban areas like Enfield suffer very severely in many cases from road runoffs. That's kind of hydrocarbons and heavy metals and other types of suspended solids, but also misconnections are a major issue in Enfield. So we've got a separate sewer system. So in theory, everything in the surface water sewer should be lovely, clean rainwater. But what happens in many cases is that people sometimes unscrupulous builders sometimes plumb in the wrong type of pipe into the wrong pipe when they're doing extensions and things, and you end up with effluent that should be going to the foul sewer actually going into the surface water sewer, and that is another major cause of nutrient overloading and so on. So the way wetlands can help to address that is, first of all, by kind of filtering out the suspended solids, which many of the pollutants adhere to, but also the plants themselves will kind of uptake a certain amount of nutrient, reducing the risk of eutrophication. And one of the other major actions in the wetland is the kind of microbial action. So providing an opportunity for the water to kind of, slow down, providing the right levels of oxygen and a medium for the bacteria to live on, encourages those types of bacteria to break down many of the pollutants. And essentially, we've done a lot of monitoring of many of the wetlands in Enfield, and what we've demonstrated on numerous occasions is that the water coming out of them is a lot cleaner than what went in. So biodiversity, I mean, obviously, you probably all know that wetlands are, a habitat that's been in decline historically in the UK. And, they're fantastic habitat. Any type of green space with water is going to be brilliant, really, for a wide range of wildlife. But wetlands are particularly good, as I say, especially because the water is getting progressively cleaner as it passes through the wetland. One of the issues that we do face is that we're trying to strike the right balance between utilising these features as essentially kind of treatment features. So we recognise that the water coming in is quite polluted, but we're also trying to create something that is a habitat in its own right. So when we're designing them, we do try and think about this and try and encourage, the sort of habitat features like islands and marginal shelves and so on to be kind of further towards the lower end of the wetland where the water quality is likely to have been improved. But yeah, there's a few images there, so they're great, obviously, for insects and amphibians and birds and so on. But I think one of the biggest drivers, as we've heard, for trying to encourage more and more of these types of measures is really about people and amenity. And as Peter said, health and well-being benefits, whereas not so long ago they were probably considered like a fringe benefit, now they're being seen as one of the main reasons to deliver these types of things. So when we're designing them, we do think about how we can encourage and enable people to enjoy them. So there's a few things listed here. These are the types of features that we would aim to include in all of our wetlands so that people can get closer to them and experience nature better. So obviously, it's kind of obvious ones really, like footpaths, but also stepping stones and seating areas. But outdoor classrooms are something that we try and include in every project that we do. So we try and involve local schools in everything. And what we want to make sure is that there's a legacy, so schools can continue to use those features afterwards. So basically, an outdoor classroom is basically just a big seating area. It's somewhere where a teacher could bring a class of 25, 30 children, and they could all stand in a safe place and learn about nature and so on. But also things like boardwalks. Open water I've mentioned, because when we've done consultations in the past, people see open water being a key element of these types of spaces. There's something about water that kind of really attracts people and gets them interested in using and revisiting these places over and over again. So although we're kind of a constructed wetland, if you were just focusing purely on providing treatment, you might cover the whole water area in dense vegetation. But like we've said, people tend to enjoy the spaces more and get more out of it, and more likely to come back and more likely to spend time in those spaces if there's a significant area of open water available. And obviously, going back to what I said before about the improvement in water quality as the flow passes through the wetland, we would design these features so those open water spaces are located towards the lower end of the system. And the final one there is about interpretation features, which again is really important to enabling people to understand why it is that we've created these spaces and the sort of many different benefits that they can bring. So we'll put in, we try and steer away from the kind of big display boards that have got almost too much information on sometimes, and often people don't read them. We prefer to have lots of little bits of information dotted around the site, which again kind of enhances that kind of visitor experience. I've also thrown in the photo of some volunteers there, which again is key to getting local people involved and excited about the project. So what we've often do is we'll arrange planting events. So planting is a great time to get local people involved, because you've done all the big engineering, you've dug the holes, you've done the excavation, you've replumbed the pipe work and so on. And it's the kind of last step in the project when you bring the plants in, and it really gives those people a sense of ownership and involvement in the project, and hopefully they'll continue to stay involved in it and continue to look after it in the future. So the final big benefit for us, I guess, is about flood risk management. And in particular, this is important because actually it's the flood benefits that often pay for these schemes. I think of the 9 or so schemes we've delivered in Enfield so far, certainly more than half of them, the primary driver and the primary source of funding has been through reducing flood risk. They do vary quite a lot. So I mentioned there that some of the smaller ones that we've done only store 1,000 cubic meters of water, where the bigger ones are getting up to kind of 30,000. This photograph here in the top right kind of gives you an indication of, you can sort of see here, this is the natural ground level. Hopefully you can see my cursor. You can see where the wetland cells have been carved out, but then you can also see how the spoil here from the wetlands has been used to create a bund. So by creating a bund across an overland flow route, that enables you to store even more water within a park or open space, and greatly increases the flood risk benefit you can achieve. So this next slide is just a bit of flood mapping from one of the business cases that we wrote when we were developing the first farm wetlands scheme. And the top right image is showing the baseline flood risk, and you can see essentially it's the kind of green and bluey colours, the shallower flooding, and as it gets to orange and red, that's deeper water. But you can see here you've got an open space, and then further down, as the water continues to flow towards the southeast, you've got a number of properties that are flooding. And this image in the lower right is showing the flood map after the scheme has been implemented. You've still got a few, still a bit of residual risk, hasn't completely solved the problem. This is for a 1 in 100 year event, but you can see that the number of properties and the extent of flooding downstream is greatly reduced. And you can also see that there's a lot more water being stored within that green space over here. And you can see the outline of the wetland features themselves very clearly identified, because obviously that's where the deepest water is. And one of the other benefits of this approach is not only do wetlands themselves, they're much more efficient at storing water because you've dug a hole. So you, rather than storing water to a shallow depth across a great area, you're storing water deeper and therefore more of it in a smaller footprint. But also it means that people understand that that site has water in it all the time. So when it does flood, they're not surprised. Whereas if, for example, we were to create a flood storage area in a completely dry site, it might catch people unawares when suddenly it floods, when it rains heavily. This is almost getting towards the end of my slides now, but I really want to talk about this. It's quite an exciting project we're working on at the moment, where we're looking at the impact of having lots of wetlands within a river catchment and what impact that can have on fluvial flood risk. So to date, most of the flood risk we've been looking at when we've been delivering wetlands is about localized flood risk or surface water or flash flooding. But just looking at kind of small subcatchments really. Whereas with this study, we're looking at a much larger river catchments. This is the Pims Brook, and we're modelling the impact of putting a dozen or so of these wetlands across the catchment. And whereas typically with the surface water wetlands, we would look to position them online, so they're kind of on an overland flow route or on a surface water sewer. And some of these do fall into that category as well, but also many of them are adjacent to rivers. So this kind of image down here shows how we would design those so that you've got an offline flood storage area adjacent to a river, so that when the river spills into the wetland, it captures that water and holds it back there and releases it slowly. And that's a more efficient way of helping to reduce the peak flows. And this image shows the hydrograph on the river. So the red is the baseline and the green is with all those wetlands implemented. Now it might not look terrifically impressive, but bear in mind that this is a fairly significant river. There's thousands of properties within this catchment that would be at risk of flooding. So if you can just chop 5% off the peak flow, you can have a really big impact on reducing flood risk. So that's a great outcome from our point of view, and it gives us more incentive to carry on doing these measures in the future. And before I finish up, I just wanted to give a plug for the Urban Wetland Design Guide, which I've been recently working on with the Zoological Society of London, and that has now been published, and there's some information about where you can find it and hopefully learn more about designing these types of features. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. Can you unshare your screen? Thank you. That was great. There's some fantastic examples there. I'd like to move on now to next presentation from from John Bryden. John Bryden is from Thames 21, and he's going to talk to us about their community modelling, which is another fantastic example of engaging communities, empowering communities to look after their rivers and streams and improve them. So, John, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Can you see and hear me?
Yep, yeah, I see that fine. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, yeah, I'm Bryden from Thames 21, and I head up our Improving Rivers team. I'm just going to present on a community modelling project which we undertook about 3 or 4 years ago. So I suppose community modelling from my perspective is when I used to work for the Environment Agency, you know, models are often how we analyse complex problems and look to justify large business cases or large spends. Now that's very much an expert tool which often, you know, community groups can't use, and we were introduced to this concept by Oxford University, who looked to reverse that and put those tools with help in the hands of community groups to try to analyse these complex problems and develop local solutions to them. So we did that in the Pymms and Salmons Brook, which covers a lot of the area that Ian has just been speaking about. I'm not going to talk hugely about the community groups, but I do just want to sort of say, you know, these are sort of some of the sessions that we did with a number of the volunteers. And since we have undertaken this, these volunteers have formed into their own local Friends of Rivers groups. They've undertaken quite a wide range of work, from cleanups to speaking to developers and, you know, promoting the river, undertaking, you know, walks and, you know, developing that real local community led solutions to these to the issues in the rivers, and also, you know, generating that community cohesion. So we started off with a very small group, up to, you know, 6 to 8 people for each river, and they've gone and expanded that to well over 100 members of those groups. So, you know, that really highlights the power, you know, of working with communities, and something which, you know, as a single organisation we can't do that, and we do rely on the community leaders, and there's 2 of them particularly in here, Alison and Eamon, who coordinate sort of that work with a number of other people in those community groups. So this process, you know, in terms, these are, you know, what you'll see through this presentation is a number of different logos in the top right hand corner, because this is not something that Thames 21 has done on our own. It is all in partnership with a range of organisations, including Oxford University and the Camellia Project, which is a large NERC funded programme, or UKR funded programme, you know, investing community water management in London. So really that community modelling process is combining that sort of highly technical scientific knowledge with the local knowledge of the community groups, and, you know, therefore generating this participatory approach, and, you know, local decision making, and really connecting up decision makers as well. So, you know, people like Ian and the community groups, and enabling that sort of collaboration of discussion. In this case, we used INCA, which is a water quality model. However, you know, this can actually be used for any, or this technique can really be used for any, you know, modelling approach. So, you know, particularly flood risk management, where you've got flood action groups, you know, involving them in that, you know, modelling process can obviously significantly increase their understanding, and therefore, you know, support for the interventions that you are looking to do, and actually the understanding of what you're doing. If you're involved in the innovative flood resilience projects, which have recently been announced, this could be a really interesting opportunity to enable that participation. So I've got a photo here from one of the projects, and, you know, some of the water quality data that you know, we've done. I just want to sort of, you know, go back to that community modelling process and actually say a key aspect of that was, you know, actually getting, you know, walking over the catchments with the community groups, identifying the various locations where they could undertake these works, and actually, you know, a lot of our urban issues in terms of water quality or quantity or other things is because in actual fact a lot of the assets have been buried. They're all in pipes, so we got out the maps a lot of the time, traced where those pipes were, where they went through parks, and highlighted those opportunities. This Broomfield Park example is a great example of that. When we first started thinking about this, I think Enfield Council and Thames 21 walked over the site with the local Friends of group, and we walked around the site, around the boundary of it. They showed us a pond that they originally created just up by the sort of tennis courts you can see behind the fencing there on the left. And we walked around to the bottom of this site, and they actually told us that the location where we eventually built this wetland was where they thought about building a pond, but didn't for a variety of reasons. You can see on the left-hand side the various water quality improvements that this site has delivered, from the inlet to the outlet. So, quite significant pollution reduction, including sort of status, WFD status changes. So this project was delivered with funding from Coca-Cola and in partnership with the Rivers Trust, and really delivered by Enfield Council and Ian's team. The other thing to mention about this is a single project. We have got some additional funding from Coca-Cola where we hope to deliver another 5 of these schemes across Enfield, Waltham Forest and Haringey Council as well. These are the sites which were identified by the various community groups across those 3 rivers. Many of them have started to be delivered, and you can actually see some of the blue ones which are planned have already been completed. So this is a slightly old map, but we will be looking to at least start the delivery of many more of these in the near future. So INCA, just to say that it's a water quality model, and we took that in partnership with the Water Resources Associates, who are a partner of the CaMelia project. We actually undertook this work before the CaMelia project, and it sort of helped inform that bid, which is a £4 million funding. All models are different, all have their positives and strengths, but this one had a user face which could be relatively interactable by community groups, although I'll say more on that shortly. So the results of this at a catchment scale, instead of the water quality benefits at a local scale, can be seen here. So this is a model of the effects of the wetlands on the river in terms of river water quality, and you can really see that the reduction in ammonia and phosphate levels in each of the catchments with all of the wetlands undertaken is quite massive. So that's a significant improvement, and something which these catchments have often been described as some of the most polluted in the UK. So if we can get them down to anywhere near sort of some of these levels highlighted in the orange, we are really creating a much healthier environment for the ecology of the river, but also for people to enjoy, and begin to change that view of communities that into these rivers aren't just damaged but a real asset, both for ecology and also for community health as well. So the gamification of this is where Oxford University and the CaMelia programme are really working at the moment. We used the original model, which was fairly clunky, and this is very much in development at this stage. But what the CaMelia programme are doing is developing this model into something which can be used by community groups. And this begins to really change that dynamic of how communities can begin to take ownership, therefore undertake local lobbying, and sort of empowering them and enabling that sort of constructive discussions based around evidence in how to deliver better rivers and healthier rivers. Now, this is the water quality model INCA, and this is an interface which the BGS are leading on to enable that collaboration. So it's something which in future could be rolled out much more to deliver those multiple benefits and enable those multiple benefits to be delivered. So yeah, I'd just like to thank you again for listening, and just to say that really from my perspective it's all about how we go about delivering locations like this, which is First Farm and what Ian spoke about before, and really how these sites can enable much more progressive relationships with our rivers and much more understanding and ownership of communities. And sites like this which not only deliver healthier rivers but can deliver much more healthy communities, and we really saw that with this site where there was huge user participation in the site, which has continued to this day and really enabled that cohesion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. That was a really good run through of the importance of both educating people and giving them the tools to do things about their local environment, and how powerful those sort of tools are in terms of getting people engaged and giving them the incentive for engagement. So thank you very much. Now our next presentation, our last presentation, is on schools engagement with SuDs. Charlene Duncan is going to do this, and this shows the other aspect of engagement. This is engaging with SuDs, kids with SuDs in schools, has been really successful in terms of raising awareness, not just amongst the kids but amongst their parents as well. So I'll hand over to Charlene now, and Charlene, are you ready?
Hello, I'm Charlene Duncan, and I work for the South East Rivers Trust, and I'm the Education and Community Outreach Officer for the SuDs in Sutton Schools programme. And so for the last few years, I've been involved in school engagement with SuDs, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So it can be a challenge trying to get people excited about sustainable drainage systems, but we have had a number of successes with that, and so that's what I'm going to outline. So before I get on to that, though, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the project background. So where is it happening? Here we go. Here's where the project is happening, in the southwest area of London, and the outline is the Wandle, the catchment, and the area circled in red is the target area. So we've been targeting schools in that particular area to install SuDs to reduce flood risk. And the project is a partnership project with Sutton Council. So the London Borough of Sutton is managing the project as a whole, whereas the role within the South East Rivers Trust has been to add value for schools. And I cannot emphasize enough how important this is, adding value for schools. There needs to be some sort of benefits that the schools feel they are receiving in order for them to be involved, in order to secure the buy-in that is needed for the project to be a success. Okay, so what sorts of things have I done? Within my role, I have been ensuring that the design features are providing benefits for the schools. I've been providing an educational offer for the participating schools and garnering support more widely for SuDs and the project specifically as well. So you can see this is the sort of thing that we're aiming for. This is the reaction of a pupil who participated in one of my sessions to a rain garden that had been installed. And she has written, "The rain garden makes me feel delighted because it is better for the environment and prevents floods." So if we can get everyone to have that sort of reaction to SuDs, that's what we're after. Okay, so adding value for schools and designing features that provide actual school benefits. It may seem obvious that you have a grey playground like this, and if you were to add greenery, tree pits, planters, rain gardens, that it would provide amenity benefit, maybe wildlife benefit, well-being benefit. There's lots of advantages to greening grey spaces. But the problem is that schools are very busy sites. So it's really important to ensure that design features are not causing conflicts with site users. So the way that the site is already being used. So for example, in this picture, we wanted to put some planters along the walls, and we found out that they're actually regularly used at every break time, some of the walls, for kickabouts. And if we put planters there, it would cause an obstruction for that usage. So those are the sorts of things that you need to make sure that you're avoiding. And you also need to talk to the staff to make sure that you're maximizing opportunities that are available. So we did this by engaging staff in three different stages in the design process. So the first thing that was produced as far as designs go were concept designs. And these were produced by Metis consultants on behalf of the council. And these were just to give an idea of what might be achievable on site. And at the beginning of the project, we sent out some staff surveys, and I did a staff meeting to generate support and get some input on what they think might be some good ideas, where there's areas for improvement, and also where there are obstacles, or how the playground is already being used. It was really important to get that input at the start. And so we used both these staff surveys and the staff meeting to get that input, and their input then influenced the outline designs. Now, the outline designs were also based on surveys, so topographical surveys and utility surveys. And so these were more practical ideas of what could be achieved on site. And then we presented those outline designs to the staff again in a drop-in session. We got lots of input from the staff on the outline designs, and that input then influenced the final designs, which were then approved by the management of the school and signed off, ready for delivery. So we involved the staff at all these stages, and it's really important because we picked up lots of really good opportunities and potential conflicts, and you can see some here. So this is what I'm talking about. So on the left, you can see that we've installed some SuDs planters with benches. And it turned out in one of the surveys that there was an area of the school that is used for lunches, and there was a shortage of seating in that area. So we had a real chance to add something that would add value to the school. Benches would be something useful to them in that area. Okay, and in the second picture, you can see a planter that is actually moved away from the wall. Now, originally that was due to be against the wall, but during a drop-in session, a teacher pointed out that by moving it away from the wall, you could actually fit pupils all the way around. And there are 2 planters in this area, and so the 2 planters could then accommodate a full class of children, and this would then make that a really usable educational resource. And so a simple tweak like that, and we were able to produce something that would be more valued by the school. And that's what you're looking for. You want the SuDs that you input to be valued, because then they will take ownership of their SuDs, and they will be maintained, and that's what we want. Okay, so that staff input, really important throughout the design process, but we also want to engage the pupils. And I would say at a minimum, we decided that we wanted to do this offer. So this is our standard educational offer that we did with all schools involved in the project. We offered them a whole school assembly. Then we targeted a group of children with an introduction session that really embeds the principles of SuDs, and then a pupil input session where they got to draw some pictures to influence the designs, and then at the end, a planting day where they got to add some plants to the SuDs installed on site. So this is a really good way of involving the school children throughout the SuDs project, with the SuDs assembly happening at the launch of the project, the introduction and pupil input session happening during the design phase, and the planting day at the end. So that's a really good series of lessons, and we had enormous success with those. But through this project, we also had the chance to trial a number of other options. So some additional activities that we did with pupils was this: a Lego session where pupils built some Lego SuDs models for us. And not only was this really valued by the children who participated in the session, but this then gave us a really valuable resource that we could use for public engagement. So these SuDs models have been used at numerous public events. Okay, we also had a SuDs animation, again, really useful for engaging people in the project or engaging people in SuDs more generally, a really useful resource for us to have this animation. And you can find it on YouTube. If you just search SuDs Not Floods, it's the first one that comes up. Do take a look. Okay, and then we also had site visits. So the council had some rain gardens produced on their site before SuDs had been delivered in schools. So we invited some school children to attend an event at the rain gardens where we put on a number of activities. And this was a real way for them to see what SuDs looked like before they were installed in school. And that was a really rewarding session as well. Okay, so lots of things that could be done with schools, and we've tried a lot, and schools are really open to lots of different ideas. So work with the teachers, find ways of engaging the pupils. Another thing that we tried, one more thing, was a SuDs champion session. So an eco council that hadn't previously been involved were keen to get involved. So we designed a SuDs champion program where they completed 4 sessions. And after each session, they returned to their individual classes where they could be advocates for SuDs. But at the end of the program, they received these green roof shed kits and certificates that they could take home. And then they could also be advocates at home about SuDs and explain what was happening in their school to their families. So a great way of just spreading that SuDs not floods message. So lots of different ways that you can involve pupils, but also it's really important for any SuDs project, especially for SuDs in schools, but any SuDs project, is to engage the community and get the whole community on board. Because obviously if they're also applying SuDs principles at home, then that will increase the impact that your SuDs will have. So we did a number of things. We had stalls at summer fairs and local events, and we just really worked hard to spread the SuDs not floods message. And I just feel this is really important at this time when environmental awareness is on the increase. We want to get SuDs on the public agenda. We want to get backing for SuDs and just make awareness so that there is full support for SuDs. And that's what I want to end with, really, is no matter what you're doing with your SuDs project, please do shout about it. So it's so easy for SuDs to be installed and just be discreet or hardly noticed. And we need to be drawing people's attention. So you can see I've got an interpretation board here. We need to be shouting about SuDs to staff members. We need to be shouting about it to the pupils, and we need to be shouting about it to the community so that everyone is on board, everyone is aware of SuDs, and we can raise the profile of SuDs and get it on the public agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene. That was really, really good. Can you unshare your screen? Thanks. We're very tight on time for Q&A. We've had most of pretty well all the questions that have come up have been answered in the course of the webinar. There's only one outstanding one, which is came in earlier. I'm not sure exactly which aspect it refers to, but it was has the insurance cost liability corporate and consumer been assessed in any way? I don't know whether anybody else has got any views on this, but it's certainly not been an issue, either insurance or liability on any of the things that I've ever been involved in. I mean, when I say it's not been an issue, it's been an issue, but it's not been a significant issue. It's been easily managed. I don't know whether anyone else on the panel has any views. In that case, I think we'll move on. And the other thing that people have been asking a lot, which I think we've more or less answered, is where will the both the presentation and the webinar be available from? Well, I've put the link to the guidance in the chat and the Q&A, so you should have seen that. You should all be able to get that now. Becky, do you want to say any more about where the slides and the presentations will be available?
So just to say that over the next few days, we'll just process the recording and we'll put that on YouTube, and then we'll have a link to that video and we can upload the presentations or to the CaBA website. So just keep an eye out for that. It should be up within the next week.
Thank you very much. I think we really need to draw a close now, as we are running out of time and people are having to bail out. So I'd just like to thank all of you for attending, and all the panelists for some amazing presentations, and just to highlight again that the guidance on delivering better water management through local engagement is now live, and it contains a lot of examples, including a lot of the examples you've heard today, about how to deliver it in practice, of what people have done to showcase what's possible. And it really is an important read in terms of how to engage, how to empower communities, how to use that data and information, and how to develop projects and secure funding. So please look at it, and please take forward what it says. So thank you again, and goodbye.